Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming back to the Citrine Path. Today, again, we have myself, Amber, and my amazing co-host.
And I'm Patsy from Violet Elements. Before we get started here, we just want to share real quick that this is our journeys and our guest journey on their spiritual life and their herbal life. So, everything we talk about here, we do recommend you do your own research and definitely talk to your provider before you start any herbal remedies or home remedies.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Citrine Path. So today, I'm super excited. We have our first expert guest today. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit first, then?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name's Joe Fuller. Um, I am the proud dad and pop-up of that beautiful baby sitting in that girl's lap. So I have kind of an eclectic background in, started out running around the woods as a kid. Um, classic Northwest kind of kid. Grew up, spent some time as a military brat, ran around in the woods in Kentucky and Colorado and a few other places. Spent some time in the military, some time in corrections, and as an adult, I've spent just about every moment I could in the woods at some point in time in some way. And throughout my life and kind of throughout my experiences, I've always been searching for like my path in life, and I usually went to the woods looking for that path. Um, that's where I find my peace. That's where my home, my house, my home, and my family. They're my life. But when I go out to the woods, that's where I feel most at home. Like that's where I feel most in my own environment. I feel um, more at peace and more yeah, in my own environment in anywhere in nature. But I think mostly in the mountains and the trees. You know, that's my jam. Like that's if I could just live in the woods for the rest of my life and not have a real job, like I would in a hot second, I would do that.
Right, that would be the dream. I remember when I was in
Right?
high school, we would just be sitting at the kitchen table and everybody would be playing video games or something. You just look at me and be like, "Hey, you ready to go?" I'm like, "Yep, let's go." And we would jump in the car and run to the woods.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. Spending a lot of time in the woods, I began to realize both from like a spiritual and from like a practical point of view, um, just how connected we are as human beings, to the earth, right? Um, regardless of the environment. That's one thing that, like other mammals, other animals in the world, they exist in a lot of times very specific environments, right? Moose, deer, elk, grasslands and woods. Some of them will range over wide varieties of territory, but in a lot of ways, like they live where they live because they benefit that specific ecosystem. And humans, and maybe possibly Sasquatch, I think, are the only animals, um, are the only beings that exist on this earth so far that I'm aware of. I mean, I believe there's a possibility for more. But they're the only beings on this earth that can survive and thrive in any environment on earth. I think that a lot of people don't take that simple fact into account, especially as we've been trapped in these, we've kind of trapped ourselves in these cities, living in these boxes for so many generations. Like I think a lot of that genetic memory, like it's still there, buried deep, in most people. I think in a lot of people, though, I think that I've seen just in my own interactions, I've seen that memory, like that connection to the earth, regardless of your spiritual beliefs, like what you want to call God or not call God or whatever. Regardless of that spiritual belief, like I think there's a huge awakening that's going on. And there's a lot of people that are realizing that, we need this connection to the earth. Like we need this connection to our environment in order to really thrive. Otherwise, you're just, running through the motions every day.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Completely. Like, I think people have became too disconnected about even like how to grow our vegetables and disconnected from like where our food comes from. And
Right.
back in the 50s, that used to be a common thing that everybody did. Everybody had a garden.
Right.
Everybody grew food for their own families. And now we have such a disconnect from nature that people can't even start seeds, let alone keep a plant alive for an entire growing season.
Right.
So
Exactly.
100% agree with you. Um,
Yeah.
so like I know that you've taught us a lot of like survival skills and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
how did
Mhm.
you kind of acquire all your survival skills that you have?
Well, a little tiny bit in the military, not really a lot. Most of what I know about survival, just in, and I mean, you could call it survival. Some of it certainly is survival, like, how do you start a fire when it's wet outside, that kind of thing in order to keep warm. But a lot of it has just been my own desire to regain my contact, regain my relationship with Earth, like in a lot of ways, a lot of a lot of religions refer to Earth as Mother Earth, right? I very much, and I have for a long, long time, believed that the Earth is she's a living being, right? And she's the one that's giving us life, right? It's her elements, it's her, it's her water, it's her, all of her plants, all of her animals. Like that's what gives us the ability to live and experience the world and reality as an expression of the universe. Um, survival, I learned a lot of it on my own. A lot of it, I spent a lot of time just doing a lot of trial and error. Like I would go out with more stuff than what I needed, but I would keep most of that in my truck and I would try to survive on as little as possible. Most of what I started out with was things like, like trying to like catch small fish and do that kind of thing or catch small rodents using deadfall traps. But all of my knowledge that I've gained by going out and doing. Not near as much as I've wanted to. I mean, if that was the case, I wouldn't live in town at all. But I'm self-taught in most ways. Um, there's so much literature out there now, and there's so much knowledge. For a kind of a small space, I think in modern society, like a lot of that knowledge kind of got lost. But a lot of that was brought back by a lot of former military guys who did things, who did classes, like survival, evasion, and resistance, Seer School. So, and then you have like the small part of the human population who never left the woods, and they've started writing books. That's one of the great things about the internet is that it's allowed a lot of these people that have all this knowledge to self-publish themselves and get that information out. I really in my with the experience that I have, and I've spent multiple nights out in the woods with minimal kit, minimal gear, built my own shelters, you know, found my own wood, made fire when it was wet, like, collected my own water because I ran out of water. Um, and found a way to live off the land. Like I had a little survival food bar, that's just like a kind of like a mushed up MRE that's dried into like this little cake bar. So I had those in reserve because I wasn't about to like go out there and risk my life just so I could learn how to survive, right? But foraging things off the land, catching small fish out of the creek, creating deadfall traps, and just moving about a mountain or an ecosystem for a few days at a time. And I would find like the best places to lay and the best places to like build a shelter. And he's so dang cute.
We're over here doing
Um,
baby yoga.
yeah, I know. Um, I wish I could still bend like that. If I have to bend like that, it's very purposeful and just flop around. Um, but yeah, I spent a lot of time, and I remember one night actually just out north here in Jim County. I was out there, and I spent 4 nights out there, and on my 3rd night, I was like I found this spot that was, like, kind of right not too far off of this creek, and, it looked like it had good drainage, and, there was, like, pine needles and stuff everywhere that kind of covered the ground, and it was fairly flat. So I built this little makeshift shelter, right up against these 2 trees, kind of right next to this creek, and the creek was, maybe as wide as this laptop, right? Like, 12, 14 inches wide, just a tiny little fast running creek that's coming down off the mountain. And I set everything up. I took probably an hour and a half, finding old logs and stuff and building this little lean-to shelter where I didn't have to sleep right on the ground and covered it in pine boughs and everything. And I fell asleep that evening and I thought, yeah, this is going to be nice. I had a little fire going, like everything was nice and warm, and I was just laying there and I fell asleep, and then I hear the patter of rain like starting to happen. Well, I built this in exactly the wrong spot because once it really started raining, where I was, it wasn't raining super hard at first, but then it like as the rain really picked up, I realized that I might have messed up, and I just lay there and I just kept hoping like, okay, everything's gonna be okay, like it'll be all right. It may get muddy underneath me, but I think I'm good to go. Like I'm gonna be okay. And I'm, like, watching, and I click my flashlight on, and this 12 or 14-inch little creek has turned into, like, a 3-foot, like, bed of water, and it's running down the mountainside, and just as I think, like, I should probably just, throw my poncho on and, grab my stuff and get the hell out of here. I, like, sit up and grab my stuff, and I reach up and, like, grab my poncho, and I'm pulling my poncho on, and when I do, the supports that I built at the bottom of this little tiny, like, makeshift shelter, um, the the dirt and then the pine needles and everything are being washed away. So, like, it starts to shift, and the next thing I know, like, that end of the shelter is starting to fall, and I wound up, like I grabbed the rest of my stuff and booked out of there real quick, and the bottom part, the foot part of my shelter wound up just falling in, because it was just, like, stacked and leaned up against each other. It wasn't secured very, very tight, and I spent the whole rest of the night, like, sitting in front of a tree as it's just pouring, like, pouring rain, and I'm just, like, curled up in my poncho sitting against the tree, like, hoping, that it's gonna stop raining so that I can find a place and build a fire, and I just sat there and froze my ass off all night. Um, I didn't get wet because I had my good poncho, but it was definitely cold. Like, I remember sitting there in the wee hours of the morning just shivering, and I finally reached into my little pack and pulled out my food bar because I'm like, I've gotta get some calories in me, if I'm gonna, like, make it through this because my teeth are chattering and I'm freezing my ass off, and, so I pull out the food bar and eat the food bar, and I just waited, and it rained all the way into the next morning and the next day. And I spent the as soon as, daylight hit, I started hiking back to the truck, and on the way down, like, it was rough. Like, I was sleep deprived, and, like, every spot on the ground just looked like the most comfortable spot where I could just lay down and take a nap. Um, but it was a good lesson learned, A lot of people, you look at, like, a spot and it looks all nice and flat and level, and it's covered with pine needles because there's pine trees everywhere. But the next time it rains, a lot of those pine needles are washed away, right? And it only takes it's crazy fast how, just a few minutes of it raining. And my guess is that it probably started raining way up on top of the mountain before it started raining on me. And so this little 12 or 14-inch stream turned into this like 3-foot little mini riverbed. And the next thing I know, like, everything that I thought I had secured and set up is, like, washing away. So, lessons like that and having experiences like that like out in the mountains, are going to teach you the most about survival and about thriving, right? Taking the extra time to make sure that you've got a good spot and a good shelter. Um, really looking at the land and looking at how it lays, and how it angles towards the stream or away from the stream or whatever it does. Like, those are lessons that are best learned in the moment. Like, you can read about them in books, and you can read about them in literature and online, and you can hear people talk about them, but those are lessons that are best learned in the moment. I would say one of the best things that anybody could do to learn survival is, one, make sure you've got a good water source, a good first aid kit, and some sort of like emergency calorie dense food, right? Make sure you have that stuff with you. And then if you're going to go out and do that, like, keep that stuff in, close on hand where you have it, but don't, that's your last resort, right? That food bar, which they don't taste that good anyway. So, I mean, you got to be really, really hungry to want to break into those food bars, because they kind of taste like bark with a little bit of syrup. But, try to live off the land. Like, take your book, take a knowledge, make yourself a notebook, and just keep going. Make multiple trips. Go to go to different areas. Try first, try a mountain. Go up in the mountains, and take time to walk the side of a mountain and look at all the areas on the side of a mountain. The draws, a lot of times in between those, as you're moving across the mountain, you've got all these draws that come down, these natural drainages. Those draws, in a lot of ways, are great places to find a lot of vegetables and like wild herbs that you can gather. First, before you go out, like, you want to make sure that your bases are covered. So you've got, water, food, fire, shelter, protection. Those are the 5 things. Like, whatever you're carrying in your pack, you wanna make sure that you can meet those 5 needs all the time. A lot of people are, they say, "Well, I've got this flint and steel, right? I can make a fire with this flint and steel." Well, if you've never made a fire with flint and steel, it's not as easy as you might think it is. Um, Flint and steel can be very effective if you're practiced using said flint and steel. You can get a spark really quick, and you can get things going. But if you just went and bought a flint and steel, and you watched a video on YouTube, and then you read a book about it, right? And keep in mind, a lot of the stuff is happening in like in ideal conditions, and you find yourself on the side of a mountain or stuck in a draw, and you're trying to use this flint and steel to light a fire. You realize that there's a technique here that you haven't learned yet. So you need to make sure that you learn those techniques first before you go. Like, take time, learn that stuff. And also, like, if you want to take your flint and steel and you want to try to make a fire with flint and steel, using a little like bird nest where you get a spark in there and you blow on it and get it going and then transfer it into the fire. Like, it can be done for sure. But if you haven't been successful at that at least 10 times, whether it's in your backyard or, like, you're just out camping and you have all your like steaks and beer and everything in your cooler, right? That's a great place to practice too. Um, but if you haven't been successful at doing that at least 10 times, carry a big lighter, like, carry a backup, right? You can go out to forage food and find food, and eat pine nuts and like whatever else is out there. But if you can't find anything out there, have that food bar in your pack, right? Because you need food. A lot of people, they're like, things like a life straw, those are huge. I've literally drank out of a muddy puddle with a life straw before. Like, it works. And I didn't get sick, right? Because that's the ultimate litmus test, right? Use it. Um, but make sure that you have clean water and access to nutrition and some sort of first aid stuff with you before you go out and do this stuff. Like, the preparation and the learning curve. Like, you've got to make your way up that learning curve before you can hike up a mountain, find food, build a shelter, build a fire with your flint and steel, and get water and make it safe to drink. Like, use the tools that are available to you and learn how to use them before you find yourself in a or put yourself in a situation where like your life, limb, and health might be at stake. That's important.
Yeah, that's 100% important. I remember we went Christmas tree hunting one year and we just pulled right off of a main road, and there was a family that got lost and it was raining and it was starting to become dark. And if we haven't come along, that could have been a very dangerous situation for them and their child.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you honestly never know. Like if you trip in a
Right.
hole and twist your ankle, how are you going to get yourself out of that situation?
Hmm.
And how are you
Yep.
going to be able to, if you have other people with you, do they know how to take care of you? Like, are you going to be able to splint yourself up or like, make yourself a brace to be able to get out? So even in my forage bag, I made a video. It's here on YouTube. I'll post it in the description or something. But I have a little survival kit. It's not a very extensive one, but I make sure I put that even in my forage bag that has flint and steel in it, compass, basic first
Mhm.
aid stuff, um, has like space blankets and even a space tent. So it's like a space blanket, but it's rectangle a little bit bigger for you to specifically make a tent out of.
Right.
But
Yep.
yeah, I think that a flint and steel is you have to have one in your kit for sure. But flint
Absolutely.
and steels are
You
hard.
know.
Like I remember when I was learning, you had to hold the striker just right and have to have it tilted
Hmm.
down at a certain angle to flick the spark perfectly. And
Hmm.
it's definitely has a learning curve, that's for sure.
I think that the funniest thing about those is there's so many versions of these flint and steels that you see, right? And usually, like the ferro rod, is about yay long, anywhere from like 3.5, 4 inches to as long as like 6 inches long, right? And that's cool if you've got a nice long ferro rod because it makes it easier, to get that spark. But I think where a lot of people don't realize, like where 90% of your, well, basically all of your control comes in, is what kind of handle is attached to that ferro rod, right? You have those ones that like you buy at like Walmart or whatever, the Cochran's ones, and they got that little tiny plastic tab that's like that big, right? And you've got like this much gripping area on the end of that thing where you can just like you can grab onto it and like that's your handle for the ferro rod, and you're trying to hold it still with just these two fingers and you're trying to like make a spark, right? Whoever made those ferro rods was one of two things. They're either dumb when it comes to making a fire with a ferro rod, or they were just cheap. Like that's all I can deduce on that. Um, the rods, the one that I carry has a large, wooden handle, and it's about yay big around. Like I can grab onto that thing with my whole hand, and I can hold on to that, and it's really easy for me to then make that spark because I've got a good solid grip with the hand that's controlling the rod. And you've got to be able to hold it still, right? Because like, imagine you're sitting in your backyard and the breeze is blowing just a little bit, and you've made this little bird nest about yay big, and you're trying to like take the spark and direct it into that little bird nest. Well, as soon as the wind blows a little bit, your little clump of grass or whatever it is, your little bird nest like moves, right? And well, now you've got to like chase this thing around with your ferro rod, like trying to get a spark in it. And the other thing is like when you put that pressure on there and you go to strike, right? Most times what happens is the ferro rod goes like this, right? Because you strike down and then your hand kind of bounces a little bit, and your sparks go like everywhere around where you're trying to get the sparks in, but they don't go into the spot where you need them to go in. And if that's all you're relying on when you go out in the woods and you don't decide, well, hey, I'm going to cheat and carry this little big lighter with me just in case, right? Try it, use it, like try to be successful with it, but always have a backup. If you are not absolutely sure of your capabilities, especially when it comes to building fire, because, well, I mean, What if you only took one canteen and it was hot that day and you drank all your water? Well, how are you going to how are you going to clean the water you're going to collect? There are springs located in most mountainous areas where if you know where that spring is, you could probably get safe drinking water. But the main rule that you want to abide by is that all drinking water that's collected in the wild is contaminated.
Hi, everybody. This is future Amber here. So, while editing this video, I realized I never really did an outro. So, I just wanted to pop in and say a huge thank you to my wonderful dad for coming on and having this conversation with us for this episode. And just wanted to say if you guys want to check him out and see him other places, you can find him with On the Go Joe, where he talks about survival bags and different things also. So if you want to find him in other places, that's where I would look. And I just want to say if you guys would give us a subscribe on YouTube, that would be a huge help to our channel with growing the podcast and with helping other people find us and giving us a like. And every time you guys share the video, it helps spread our message that we're trying to give to other people, and maybe we'll help inspire them and help them on their spiritual journey also. So share with as many people as you guys can, and we would greatly appreciate. River says yes also. um, Greatly appreciate every single one of them. So if you guys have any other topics you guys want us to cover, if you guys have any questions about anything we've talked about in the past or talked about in this episode, let us know in the comments below. You can always find Citrine Enlightenment and Violet Elements on pretty much every social media platform. So just look up either Citrine Enlightenment or Violet Elements. We're on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and we both have an Etsy shop. So if you want to check out what products we have to offer, you can always find us there too. And both of us love to do custom orders, so please reach out. Or if you guys just need advice on what you guys need or any questions that you have, we love having conversations with you guys. We love educating, and we love just spreading our knowledge and our love of plants and how we use them and different ways to use them. And yeah, I just want to say thank you guys so much for following along. Now I think this is episode 11, so that means it's over 2 months now that we've been doing this podcast, and it's been so much fun for myself, and I know for my mom it's been a lot of fun, researching these new topics, learning new things, broadening our horizons of what we know and what we're interested in, and getting to see your guys' comments and feedback on all of our videos helps brighten our day every single day. So until next week, I can't wait to see what we're going to talk about, and I can't wait to reach more people. Not treat, cure, or diagnose any illness. So if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, please reach out to your provider.
So we are always so honored and blessed that you spent your time with us, and we can't wait to visit with you next time. So please come back and visit us. But until then, go forth with love and intention.